Looking at the current information from National Hurricane Center, Katia has become a Cat 1 hurricane 2 or 3 days before it's expected to. Look at the speed, 75 miles an hour. Look how low the central pressure is, 992. That's lower pressure than Jose. This is a Cat 1, 75 mile per hour winds, but the pressure is 994. It's, again, Irma 185, 914 millibars and dropping. It's moving 16 miles an hour to the west-northwest. And which way now is Katia moving? To the southeast, out into the Gulf at 3 miles an hour, very slow. 16 miles an hour to the west-northwest. Again, 75 mile per hour winds. 3 hurricanes. In the center, the strongest Atlantic hurricane in history, in recorded history, where we could actually monitor these things. Notice the amount of moisture being pumped across the Gulf, across the Florida Panhandle. Check that out, guys. That's just setting up for a flood and more flooding conditions, especially if your ground's already saturated. Storm in the rear again. But Irma is moving north of the islands. That's why in the beginning of this video, I showed you those images. But last night I said if this thing comes north of the islands because of the counterclockwise rotation, it's going to push that water across the islands. And you saw it running across them like a river. And look at this moisture. This is a Cat 1 hurricane in the Gulf of Mexico, guys. Wasn't supposed to do anything. But the further, and I said this, the further that they track Irma back into the Atlantic, where it goes up the east coast of Florida, the less pressure that's going to be pushing from Irma onto the storm Katia in the Gulf. It will linger longer now, put more moisture into the Gulf, and I promise you this storm, even though they're not saying it is, will be a Category 2 before you know it. Look at the eye in the center of this. Cat 5, 185 miles an hour, gust 222. The storm in the back, very well defined. We would be watching any of these storms if they were, each one were by themselves, but we're not. Now this front is what's going to determine where Irma pulls up. We're going to have to watch that. As Latius strengthens in the Gulf, already a 75 mile per hour storm, could go to an 80, 85, but it's in warm water. It will go to a Cat 2. At that point, the stronger it becomes, the less effective Irma is on it. That will allow it to move further into the Gulf. Now, Irma's tracking. Again, 2 p.m. Friday, guys, everyone in Florida should be fully prepared or fully evacuated. Evacuated sounds like the best idea. You saw the images at the beginning of the video that had everything to do with warning people. Here they're saying it would be at 180. It's at 185. Again, gust over 222. Staying at Cat 5 all the way until Saturday. And then they're predicting that that interaction with the islands will slow it down. I don't see that interaction happening with this model. We'll see. Regardless, all the models converge in this area, and the size of the storm is going to slam into the south tip of Florida. The Keys are going to be affected, and the wave heights on both sides of Florida are going to be elevated, according to the models. Here, the CMC and the purple line is tracking at the furthest off the coast. But look, by 2 a.m. Friday morning, 90 mile per hour winds through 2 p.m. Friday. This thing is getting stronger. It's only moving southeast into the Gulf at 3 miles an hour. That's dipping it kind of into the Bay of Campeche, where the water is extremely warm, 992 millibars. The gusts are probably approaching 100 miles an hour, but right now it's sitting there strengthening and pumping an extreme amount of moisture over Florida. And Florida's about to get hit from either side. This is the global forecast model. What it's showing is coming in, striking South Florida, and easing back out somewhere up around the Cape Canaveral area. Check it out. The other storm is right behind it. Either way, both sides of Florida will be affected. Now, if it stays at this track, it shows it pushing the hurricane in the Gulf back across Mexico. But these models did not anticipate Katia becoming a hurricane. They really didn't know what it would do. So it's going to have some back push of its own. And again, the further eastward that this storm tracks, the more that Katia is going to affect us in the Gulf of Mexico. Look at that. Check it out. That was nav, Jim. Here's the wave heights, and this is what I was talking about. When it comes in and strikes South Florida, it could possibly have a foot in the Gulf and a foot in the Atlantic. Notice your wave heights increasing in the Gulf also. The highest waves are right along the Florida East Coast. That's where you saw that intense flooding coming across the Caribbean islands. You're talking about 50 to 55 foot waves in the eye. Now, not on shore, but that tells you how much energy is going to be pushing water. And you're Florida at that point, you're in the same location that the islands were as we saw these videos. Notice it's still showing Jose doing a loop, and it stops there. Again, extremely extreme wave heights into the Gulf and the Atlantic, and then Jose looping. Again, this is the WRF model. What they've underestimated is right here. Notice in the Gulf of Mexico, they never anticipated Katia to become much more than a low pressure area. But now it's as strong as Jose. So that tells you that this model has highly miscalculated Katia in the Gulf. Look at that. Now, what we're going to have to be watching again tonight, we've got a coronal mass ejection coming in. Possible earthquakes. Then in the next few days, we've got these hurricanes coming in. And around the 9th, we're going to see the coronal mass ejection from this X10 plus flare. And on the 9th, Irma will be extremely close to the Florida shores. We don't know exactly what the storm in the Gulf will be doing at this time. It will depend on how far east or west the track of Irma goes. Either way, nobody along the inner Gulf Coast needs any rain. It's been a very wet summer. As we're watching it, you watch it, it's a heads up. Be safe.